So today I was watching Bloomberg and this guy named Joseph LaVorgna came on. And it's kind of ironic because he's a financial market strategist and he focuses on global economic conditions. But yet he was misleading the American people today when it came to trade wars. And he was telling the American people that the United States has leverage over Canada and Mexico, and whatever Donald Trump is doing is working because Mexico and Canada depend so much on the United States for the majority of their money, especially Mexico. But he's misleading you tremendously, and I'm going to tell you why. I took a few notes because this is way too important. So the belief that Mexico and Canada depend entirely on the United States is false. And Joseph LaVorgna was misleading the American people by not giving you the full picture. And this is why. Joseph assumes that Mexico and Canada will always be dependent on the United States, and that is false. Both nations are actively diversifying their trade partnerships, reducing the U.S. economic leverage. Why? Trump has repeatedly changed his trade agreements with no regards to longevity. He did this from 2016 to 2020, and he's doing it again. In fact, the current trade agreement that we have is the one that Trump negotiated last time. But I guess it wasn't good enough, so here we are again. Other countries now realize they can't trust the United States to honor an agreement. And this is what's forced Canada and Mexico to level up. Instead of staying reliant on the United States, you know what Mexico and Canada has been doing the last few years? Mexico and Canada has expanded their trade partnerships. Mexico now trades more with China, the EU, and the CPTPP nations. Canada has strengthened its agreements with Europe and Asia to reduce its reliance on the US. Mexico is strengthening its ties with China and other international markets. Trades between Mexico and China have grew over $100 billion in 2023. China is heavily investing in Mexico's infrastructure, energy, and manufacturing sectors. Mexico is developing alternative trade routes to surpass the US. New logistic hubs, and trade corridors means goods can cross through Mexico without ever touching the US soil. Canada is actively strengthening its global partnerships. Canada's free trade agreements with the Europe CETA and the expansion into intra-Pacific markets makes it less dependent on the United States than before. What Donald Trump is doing, before I continue this, is causing Mexico and Canada to think out of the box and say, you know what? We can't depend on these people. They just keep on changing their policies. Every single time there's another president, especially someone like this man that's in office, they cause chaos. We can't depend on the United States anymore. We need to level up. So we're going to start talking to other countries, and we're going to build our trade with other countries because it will better benefit us. So all the United States is doing is pushing Canada and Mexico to level up, which is a good thing for them. Somebody's pushing them because nobody's pushing us. All we're doing is causing chaos. Let me continue. So why is U.S. trade leverage weakening? Mexico is building alternative trade routes that will surpass the U.S. entirely. Canada and Mexico companies have better trade agreements with other nations. Companies like Ford are staying in Mexico. No, they're not coming back here, because it's just too expensive. Even with the tariffs, it's just too expensive to work in the United States if you guys actually want cheaper cars and cheaper things. Mexico and Canada expanding trade is pulling businesses away from the US. If the US continues pushing tariffs and economic nationalism, companies will relocate to Mexico and Canada, where they reach global markets more easily. Listen to this. Listen to this carefully. You keep on saying America only, and they're going to bring America products back to the United States. Listen, if Ford or any other company leaves the United States and they go into Mexico and then they sell directly from Mexico to other countries, they're skipping the United States altogether. People are tired of the United States and its games. Think out of the box. Don't think logically. This is not logic. It actually is, but me trying to explain this to you is so hard when you've been so manipulated to this America only thing. If people leave the United States because they have products that they deliver to other countries, if they go to Mexico and build their business there and they don't have to worry about this 25% tariff or all this other stuff, and they do free trade with other countries, they're going to leave the United States. It's not going to bring jobs back here. It's not going to bring companies back here. It's going to take companies out of here and relocate in other countries where there's free trade, and then sell directly from that country to another country and leave the United States out of it all. So to Joseph LaVorgna, who is an economic strategist, and he knows about the global economy, he's miscalculating everything and he's misleading you because he's leaving this out. Him saying that the U.S. has leverage over Mexico because it needs American money, that's wrong. Mexico and Canada have already been preparing for years for a world where they cannot depend on the United States. If Trump or any leader continues to go down this path, Americans will lose in the trade dominance. Here's an example. People keep on saying that Ford's going to come back. Well, despite all the claims that companies are returning back to the United States, Ford announced that it invested $273 million in Mexico for EV drive unit production. Why? Because the United States is still too expensive. Even with tariffs, the United States is too expensive. The U.S. has a higher operational cost than Mexico and Canada. Labor costs in Mexico and Canada are way lower, regardless of tariffs. Mexico and Canada have free health care, better work benefits, which means lower cost to companies. U.S. companies are struggling with rising expenses, making Mexico and Canada more attractive for companies just to leave the United States and move to Canada or Mexico, build their companies there and trade it with other countries that have free trade, and not have to deal with all this stupid tariffs and all these stupid changes and no two agreements between countries. What's ironic and what is truthful and what's actually happening is Trump is pushing the U.S. out of power. Trump trade instability pushes Mexico and Canada to become stronger. Instead of hurting them, he's forcing them to become more independent. So if the U.S. doesn't wake up, all it's going to do is cause Mexico and China to thrive. So here's a bigger picture. The U.S. is driving businesses away, and Joseph and others that are pushing U.S. has all their leverage is failing to acknowledge that trade is shifting. And if the U.S. is assuming that Mexico and Canada have no other options, America will lose companies, investments, and global trade partners. Mexico is already preparing to bypass the U.S. for trade. Canada is strengthening partnerships with Europe and Asia. Companies like Ford are investing more in Mexico and not in the United States. The U.S. needs to wake up to the reality of global trade, risk losing its competitive edge. If the U.S. does not wake up, it will fall behind as Canada and Mexico thrive because they're thinking out of the box and thinking, let's just get around and go around the U.S. and not rely on them anymore. Because we're assuming that we are the only people in the world that anybody will come to. We're the only people, it's just us, America only. No, it's not. The point that I want to give you here is, it's important to do your research because anybody can take what he says and make it seem like a beautiful thing or make it seem like it's the right thing for the United States. But in reality, if you actually get your head out of American news and start seeing what other countries are doing to advance their country, you will realize that a lot of them are saying, F the USA, we need to work with other countries and grow our trade and our global economy with other countries because the United States just keeps on changing the script. There's chaos right now. And we're going to have to come to a reckoning in our own country because all we do is fight with each other. I just wanted to open your mind to make you understand that other countries are prepared and they're leveling up. I want to add one last thing. I don't want to pretend that I know everything because obviously I don't. But one thing I did add to my knowledge is that I needed to learn what was going on in other economies outside of my own. And this is why I know this information. I have been paying attention. What is Canada doing? What is Mexico doing to better themselves so they don't rely so much on the United States? And this is why I know this information.